Hello folks, I hope you're having a great day today. Hey, today I'm going to take a look at Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. It's an 1871 work, and it's written by Edward Bulwer-Lytton. I just finished it today. I'm actually recording this on the 4th of the new year, and I'll be probably putting it out there for you on the next day, on tomorrow. So I'll go ahead and edit it today and go ahead and send it out there for you. This is the second book I've read this year. The first book I finished on the 1st, and that was Symzonia, Voyage of Discovery, which we looked at already for you folks. I really did like Symzonia, probably more than I thought I was going to, and I liked Vril less than I thought, I was going to, so it's pretty interesting. Because one of those books is known pretty well in the world, and the other one isn't. And I think the one who's known well wasn't as well written as the one that's not well known was. But hey, that's sometimes the nature of history, right? And what we remember and what we don't. You get that from oldies channels too. Like when you're listening to an oldies channel, the songs that were popular during that time aren't always the songs that are being played on the station now. Songs that hit top 4, top 5s and 6s and 7, but you know, bubblegum pop that may not be popular anymore, like Chewy 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 that hit the top 10. May not be played on a 60s era or an oldies station because it's not popular with the people that are listening to it today. So, I mean, that's just a way of things. It's apparently the same with these books as well. So let's take a look at Vril. Vril is a big name in the world. It's really big in Europe particularly. It was published in the UK by Edward, and it was hugely popular at the time that it was read. Incredibly so. It's an underground exploration into a utopian society that reveals the Vril, which is this sort of energy-like thing, and then also the race of people, the Vril-la, that can use it and that live in the sort of underworld areas and so forth. And he is, after surviving and returning from his expedition, he's coming to warn humans of the fact that these people will eventually come up here because they keep expanding and so forth underground. So they're going to come up here. So now he's writing this book in order to let folks know they need to get on board with knowing who's coming out to take them out. Not to take them out necessarily, but that they're going to be coming out and they're not going to not take no for an answer. And they're a very powerful group of people, particularly because they have mastered this power, this electric energy called Vril that they can use to use for a number of different things. And there are a number of science fiction elements in the book as well. Now, the book is only like 90 pages long. I found it to be a little bit harder to read because it wasn't as good of a story. But we'll take a look at that in a moment. But here, let me give you a synopsis of it first. Then we'll take a look at the sort of the history of it and how it's still pertinent up through now. It's still being name dropped in movies and popular culture as of like 2019. And then we'll take a look at what my thoughts were and compare it to some of the other books published during that era that I've read too, because I'm not impressed with it as a novel. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Let's start with the synopsis of Vril. You're going to start with this gentleman who is meeting up with one of his friends who is in a mining expedition out in America. They're both Americans. Him and his friend will tell him that a recent new dig expedition was found, that they found this nice new area. He went out to explore it, saw something pretty unusual there. He came across something that looked like a road with lamps, like gaslit lamps on it, and he didn't know what it was. There were no other mining companies that were in the area that may have, you know, put this down there. They're not near any, you know, any civilizations, and it really kind of scared him. But he wants to go back down there, and his friend, who's our main point of view character, will go with him too. So the two of them, they're going to head on down. And the idea is that they are going to check it out and see. And so within the first, before 10 pages is even passed, they are going to head down, mount up some stuff. Our point of view character is going to make it down first. The rocks are going to peel back from the next person. He's going to fall down and die in an accident. After he falls down and dies in an accident, this giant lizard-like creature who's a dinosaur will pop out. A remnant of dinosaurs will pop out and arrive on the scene, basically take his body off and eat it. Our main character will run away from that. This big giant dinosaur that's popping out. He's going to flee towards not anything right down the road. He eventually encounters this demonic, angelic looking creature that looks very different, but still is very human. But it has different features than ours, and it has wings on it. He's not sure what the wings are, they look weird. But basically, he's going to encounter this because they're going to have a language difficulty because they don't know each other. And then he is going to be brought into their camp. And eventually, they're going to basically zap him and knock him unconscious. And then when he comes back to in one of their houses. And slowly he's going to be introduced to them in their society. These are the Vril-la. They are descendants of a race that was pre-diluvian and was pushed down to the underground after the deluge hit the world. And they have been living down there ever since for thousands of years. They have set up a number of cultures and societies. They have these mechanical wings that they can take on and off that are fueled by this energy thing called the Vril. And the Vril also will fund everything. It will also fuel things like elevators, weapons of mass destruction. Like seriously, like they're going to kill things very quickly. He talks about how, you know, just a couple of children could kill an entire city in minutes with the power of the Vril. They have these Vril staffs that will launch like lightning bolts of energy that will coalesce and kill people. Anyway, so they have a number of these inventions. They also have these basically servants that they've created from themselves that are basically mechanical. He calls them automatons. They don't seem like they're clockwork or anything like that. They seem to be genuinely more advanced than that. They're probably, if they were pre-robot robots, I would not be surprised. They have no intelligence. You have to control them, give them orders, those sorts of things. But I would not be, if you want to call them pro-robots, it's fine. I would not be upset at that kind of connotation. But again, they're created constructs that are not clockwork or anything like that, but were actually made to be servants in the household. So there are a number of these sorts of science fiction elements to the story, from Vril itself to elevators, staffs, transportation, the wings themselves on these humans, and more. So it does have a number of these sorts of things. The Vril energies, they also have healing powers if used correctly. So they're used on him to heal him from his damages he sustained in the fall and fleeing from this giant dinosaur creature. And that's like, and again, it's like 12 pages into the story. Basically, the rest of the story, until the last 10 pages or so, is going to spend just exploring Vril society with a couple of the people. In particular, the daughter of his host, the one who first found him, is basically one of his main points of contact for the society. She's a member of the Council of Sages, and so she's really, really, really smart. And she's also, her specialties in research are with people, men, and called the On, and also, I'm sorry, called the Arn. They are spelled On, but they're pronounced Arn. But you'll read everything from pages on their language to how they count things, how they have things. They have a number of features in their society, like women are not only equal to men, but often lead in everything from romantic relationships, which is different than Symzonia. Symzonia has a throwaway paragraph, which I've already reviewed for you. I'll link it to you below. In Symzonia, which was a 1820 work, which is the first sort of exploration of a hollow world, and you come across a utopian society down there called the Symzonians. They, in their culture, supposedly have, and there's a throwaway paragraph near the end of the sort of explanation of Symzonian society, and at the end of it there is a paragraph that says that women are equal to men, but you never see it. None of the Symzonians are female, that they interact with a female. They don't have positions of power. They're not talked about at all. There's just one quick paragraph that says, hey, they're equal too, in this society that's egalitarian. Here, the Vril society, the Vril-la, if you will, they're very, very different. And they have, the women here have a very strong role. There's many female characters that you will meet, and we met too, and arguably the main one is Z, is the daughter of the host, and she is a female too, and you'll see specifically how there are many ways in which they actually lead. They're taller, they're stronger, they're more combative, they're more emotional, they're faster to things. They will, you know, a man will never go to them and say, "Hey, I like you. Let's go on a date," or anything like that. It's all about the women, what they want in their society when it comes to seeking romantic relationships. So it's an interesting society in that context. And seeing that in this case, our writer, Edward Lytton, actually has the characters with showing as well as telling us, which is interesting to me, I think. You find out a lot about them. They expand down in the underworld quite a lot. There are constantly new villages and new places being set up in the underworld. And so he believes that eventually they're going to go to the upper world, especially after he told them who he was, and then he finds out that they're they're expanding. So they will accept and bring in with hospitality anybody who can be of benefit to their society, and they won't hurt anything that won't hurt them. If you can't hurt me, I'm not going to hurt you ever. But if you are coming against their community, they're going to take you down without hesitation, and they're going to take you down very quickly. And they believe it's their righteous duty to do so. They believe in God. That God created the world, but they don't believe it's appropriate to think about that or to dwell on that. They believe that to dwell on the nature of God would be to try to subsume that you could know God or that God is knowable, that the infinite and all-powerful God cannot be known or understood by finite minds, and to attempt to do so is folly, which is an interesting sort of concept. But anyway, there's a lot of sort of pithy moments, things that are happening that really kind of say, hey, that's kind of cool. There's this one place where the people who have power in their society don't want it because those roles don't have any additional money, don't have any additional power. You're not living in good places. There's no real reason to have so nobody wants to have these roles for society. And what winds up happening is that one person will give it to the next. They'll appoint the next person to do it, and they won't appoint somebody that they like their children or something like that, because they don't want to do it either. Nobody wants these responsibilities of authority in their culture, which is cool. And so they'll choose somebody neutrally that they think will do the best job for their society, rather than somebody who wants it or somebody who doesn't want it, in order to keep it in the family. And there are, if for some reason they can't do it, then three members of the Council of Sages will be chosen at random. They'll draw lots, and those two people will choose somebody else. So the person who was going to choose it, if they accidentally died before they could do so, or if they felt they could not do so impartially, then they wouldn't. And only 3 people from the entire Council of Sages would do it, because they believe that one person who's making a decision neutrally can make a better decision than multiple people who's making decisions selfishly, who might want to make sure that their enemy gets it, or something like that, rather than, right. So by just having only 3 people doing it, so they had this idea that the more people make a decision, the stupider it becomes, the more selfish it becomes. And when one person's making a neutral decision for the best of the society, they'll make a better decision. And that little throwaway line about that, I think that was clever. And there's a lot of those little vignettes in there too, which is cool. Now, I didn't like it as a novel because it's not a novel. The problem with any sort of utopian narrative story is that if you're setting a story in a utopia, the problem is that in a utopian society, you're telling a story for a purpose, namely to talk about our social culture, right? You know, and you'll see this with Robert Heinlein, for example, with Stranger in a Strange Land. He's using this outsider from this, this Martian society who's coming back to Earth, who grew up there, to have this who had this sort of utopian almost society and upbringing, who's going to talk to us now about what that was like. And similarly, you do the same thing with other utopian works, like City of the Gods, for example, is probably the most famous one, by St. Augustine. But the problem is that when you're telling these utopian societies that show a better society and what we can strive towards, you're telling it for didactic purposes. So in order for you to have a utopian story, you need to have a good story in the utopian setting, not a setting. Because if your interest is in the setting only, not in a story that's set in the setting, then you're not going to have a good story. You have to give us a good story, and there's no story here. I can tell you what happens in one paragraph, from the beginning till the end. It's not, and I don't mean like a little synopsis, but then like 18,000 things happen that are a part of that in a novel form. Nope. I mean, like I told you, within the first 10 pages, his friend has died, he's arrived, and he's met up with them, and he's been brought into their society. That's a lot for his 10 pages, right? And he doesn't leave until 3 pages before the end. And it's just like society, all there between there. That's all he cares about, is giving us this world. So I am surprised that this work, a work that lacked any sort of plot or narrative structure, would have any sort of impact on the world. I'm surprised, even in 1871, I am surprised at that. Here, let me give you some counter examples. I have read books from right around this time by, as an example, H. Rider Haggard. I've read all 3 of the King Solomon's Mines, Alan Quatermain and She. I've read other people too, like Jules Verne, stuff that were written in the 1870s. I enjoy that type of era, or earlier, 1860s, 1850s, 1880s, right, and such. I really enjoy the penny dreadful era. It's a lot of fun stuff that's being written, then that has hopefully survived. And this is something that survived. It's pertinent. But unfortunately, I don't think it's as good as any of those things that I've read, because it lacks a narrative structure. It's not a story. It's an interesting setting. It has interesting ideas. It's clearly science fiction, but it's not what I would call this compelling, great, strong narrative story. So again, I'm surprised. And again, Symzonia had a point to tell. It was trying to prove that John Sims's hollow Earth theory that had been dismissed and been put out 3 years before was actually true. So hey, this is actually true. It has a didactic story and a utopian on top of it. It's got 2 points it wants to tell, and it has a better narrative structure. And it's not even that great. I'm not holding it up as this amazing Jules Vernean novel, right? But it has a better narrative structure than, you know, Vril, The Power of the Coming Race does. By far. It isn't even close. So again, I'm surprised that Vril was so well read. But maybe, again, the setting really appeals to people. You don't need to have a story if the setting appeals to people. And it really sticks with people. So one of the things you're going to get from Vril, and I talked about how it's still a part of pulp culture, and you have seen it in books, stories, references. It's been influential in a number of places. For example, and we'll talk about this in a few moments, as soon as I hit the pause button here, I'm actually going to move to At the Earth's Core by Edgar Rice Burroughs, who was one of the people who read it and was influenced by it. So you'll see it a little bit there. You're also going to see it in places like modern stuff. Like, for example, there was a movie that was put out in 2019 that was the sequel to Iron Sky, rather, a European film from, I think, from 2012, I believe, that was featuring basically moon Nazis that set up. Nazis fled to the moon after World War II, and they built up a space fleet and came over and destroyed us in the year 2018. So now we're in a sequel. We're going to a hollow Earth. There's dinosaurs. There are Vril. It's actually called Iron Sky and the Coming Race, which clearly reflects to, you know, Vril, the Power of the Coming Race, and such. So it's clearly something that's a key part of it. It's become a part of this sort of pulp culture of the Nazi fascination with the occult that we have really taken in as a part of our pop culture ever since, with the Foule Society and a lot of these Nazi esotericism, where Nazis think that that the Aryan race descended from aliens from outer space that, you know, near various stars like Aldebaran and so forth. And you've got a lot of this fascination with things. A hollow Earth theory. They think that Nazis did expeditions down to hollow Earth. They connected with the Vril. The Vril are on their side. The Vril-la. They've harnessed the power of Vril. Right? There's a lot of this sort of fascination with it. In fact, there's even a novel published in 1960. It's not really a novel. It's a book published in 1960 that talks about Nazis' fascination with the occult, and it talks about the Vril, even though there's no evidence that they actually did that, that they had this fascination with the Vril as a part of Hitler and the Nazi reign in Germany. But again, it's just a key, it's just been a big pickup in more recent versions. It's even one of the keys in Hollow Earth Expeditions, which is a role-playing game set in the pulp era, and you have this Hollow Earth world, and in it, your key people that you're fighting against are, surprise, surprise, Nazis. So it's been a key part of that too. So the Vril have been added. They love this book. A lot of people, when they read this book, believed that it was true, that this was actually happening. And that, that the story in here actually was true, and that these were a race of humans that had fallen pre-antediluvian, that had fallen under the water from the deluge, underground, after the deluge, and had gained all these powers, and were super powerful and looked a little bit angelic or demonic in nature. So there's a little bit of this kind of, hey, this seems right to me. Let's get ourselves ready. Let's reach out. Let's do some expeditions. Let's find out for sure. So again, it had that sort of an impact. It was very well read, very influential, and still is impactful today. So I'm going to go ahead and link it to you in case you're interested in checking it out. Take a look. Do you agree or disagree with my sentiment? Again, I don't think it has a narrative structure, but I don't think it does some bad world building. So if you're interested in checking it out, please feel free to do so. It's fun to read some of these proto-science fiction stories that have a lot of science fiction elements but aren't true science fiction stories. So check it out and let me know what you think about it. I'm happy to engage you with it further if you agree or disagree with my sort of take on the story. And hey, if you watched this review and you liked it, thanks for your time. Please feel free to hit that subscribe button, because there's going to be so many more of these sorts of reviews of old classics to follow in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And if you read it all, and if you watch this video all to the end, I just want to, hey, thank you for taking the time out of your day. Again, we all have such busy days, busy lives, and so many things happening in them. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's very humbling, and I appreciate that. So thanks again.